Howdy, folks. Justin here, and we got the big reveal today for the reward card for the month of October. That card is right here in the middle of the screen. Let me blow it up for you a little bit. Mechanical Ally, finally joining the other colors in having a card that gives you a bonus at the top of your deck, shares a color with it, and the question becomes, what's this card going to do? I mean, is this card playable? Is it good? We've had two brand new cards released so far. We had Histgrove last month, which I think had a tremendous impact on the meta. That impact was more dramatic at first than was probably realistic for its power level. As people kind of got over killing their opponents with Swamp Leviathans on turn 20, they started moving back to other more traditional decks. Although the decline in the number of players playing Control Mage is definitely still something we feel. And then the month previous to that, we had Smuggler's Hall, the green card, 6 Magicka action that when you play it, puts 4 random 0-cost cards in your hand. That card didn't really see much play at all last month, although it has begun to see a little bit of play in Assassin Hexmage decks. The cards, in terms of playability, I think a little below average. I personally, I mean, if you've been watching the channel, I really just do not like random effects of any kind. I like to keep my randomness to a minimum, so I didn't really spend a lot of time examining the card by actually playing with it, I have to admit. But its impact has been negligible, although it is played more, certainly, than a lot of other cards. This month, however, we have Mechanical Ally joining us in 10 days. What do I think about Mechanical Ally? I mean, let's assume for a second that it triggers every time, right? You play this card on turn 3, hopefully, and the top of your deck is neutral. You play a Spider Worker. Well, what is a Spider Worker? I'm going to shrink this a little bit so we can properly navigate through the cards here. Spider Worker is this fellow right here. He is a Prophecy 0/1 for 2. When it comes into play, you draw a card. So if you're spending 3 Magicka for a 3/3 and a 0/1 and you draw a card, is that a good deal? That's a fantastic deal. The problem, of course, is that a few exceptions aside, the neutral cards are not particularly great. It's not impossible to imagine a shell that runs a number of these cards, but to run one that consistently triggers the neutral ally is, at this point, maybe unrealistic. Just as a thought experiment, let's see what we would put into this thing. I don't even have any Stronghold Incubators. So we would put 2 Halls of the Dweemer. We'll just go with a new deck. Okay. And put some cards into there that we would theoretically run, and see where we can, where this idea would take us, right? So Halls of the Dweemer would be essential. We'd run 3 of these. Stronghold Eradicator is a really good card. I'd run that. Unfortunately, Dark Harvester, while, I mean, it is largely unplayable, it's also a dragon, not a Dweemer. I think Dwarven Centurion's a pretty good finisher for this deck, plus the Dwarven Spiders it gives you would be beefed up by your Halls of the Dweemer. Odiving might be playable in this deck. What else would we definitely include? Crushing Blow, Dwarven Sphere is reasonable. So those are just, and Spider Worker, I suppose. Dwarven Spider? Maybe. Let's just assume we're running Dwarven Spider to maximize on this value. So then we have to start asking ourselves, what else are we doing with these cards? How do we make these cards above the curve? How do we want? What do we want to do with these cards? And the first thought I had was Forsworn Guide. You can take advantage of these extra Dwarven Spiders. These extra Spider Workers to draw some extra cards. And then that sort of begs the question, what else can we do with Forsworn Guide? We already have Dwarven Sphere as a card we can pick up and replay. And so I started thinking about Shackle Creatures. Shrieking Harpy, reasonable card to put in this sort of thing. And then, of course, there's also Dres Tormentor. Seems like the sort of thing we would want to fit into a deck that was already running Shackle cards. Which means we'd probably want to run Winter's Grasp. But we're still having the problem where we don't have a ton of neutral cards in the deck. Not as many as we want if we want to go full neutral, right? So I started looking at Ravenous Crocodile. And I think there's some play to be had here. Ravenous Crocodile combines nicely with some of these blue cards, including the cards that give you things when their wards go away, like Daggerfall Mage. A reasonable one to do some damage to. And, of course, purple cards like Iliac Sorcerer, which would give us a 1-drop. So let's throw Iliac Sorcerer in this theoretical list. Our curve is really high on the 3s right now, but we still have some room. Remember, we would be running more copies of some of these cards. And then we're asking ourselves, in this color combination, what else do we want to do? How else do we want to make this work? I think we would probably run Shornhelm Champion as one of our finishers. Another card that we could combo the Crocodile with, potentially. And, yeah. So obviously this is nothing close to a completed deck. This is just, one idea off the top of my head of something you could do with this. The good news about this card is that as more neutral cards are released, it becomes more and more likely that this card becomes really, really good. The bad news is that right now, you're really warping your deck in order to get value off of this potentially. I am very pleased to see this card made because it shows that, in the first card, Smuggler's Hall was sort of a put this card into a deck that wants to play Smuggler's Hall card. Hissgrove was a card that slotted nicely into several existing archetypes, as well as providing a huge bonus to non-green purple ramp decks that ran purple with another color instead of green. And Mechanical Ally is a card for a very niche strategy, so it makes me happy to see that each month a different approach to what this card is supposed to be is being taken. We have a Build Around Me card in Smuggler's Hall. We have Hissgrove, which is both literally and figuratively a support card that can be a finisher in a variety of decks. And then we have Mechanical Ally, which is, like I said, a niche card. In addition to a deck that's running things like the Ward creatures and a Crocodile combo, you could also run things like Crusader, I think, would be a color combination you could slot. You wouldn't run very many Crusader cards, but you could slot the Dwemer package into, using cards like Dawnstar Healer to regain life. Do I want to finish this deck? I do not. Although I will be playing a deck like this, or at least a deck with a bunch of Dwemer cards in it fairly soon. You could use cards like Dawnstar Healer to, once you build up your board full of Halls of the Dwemer beefed up creatures, gain some life back. I think this card is criminally underplayed and potentially very good. That would also give you access to cards like Dawnbreaker, Divine Fervor, Piercing Javelin, and in red, Steel Scimitar and Plunder, with which you could then equip your undersized Dwemer creatures. Those are just the two first thoughts I had off the top of my head. I look forward to playing with this card. I'm not as excited by it as I was Hissgrove, but I think that it's the sort of card that over time will definitely see some play. And worth pointing out too, in Arena, a 3/3 for 3 is pretty solid. You're probably never triggering its ability in Arena, but that's okay because it is a 3/3 for 3. So yeah, that is what I think of Mechanical Ally. I'm very excited to see this card join our ranks. I look forward to subsequent neutral cards being added, and I hope to see you all on the ladder. Thanks for watching, guys.